Are you curious about the Swingline Guillotine trimmer? Hi, I'm Jess from JessCrafts.com and I'm here to help you make the most of your crafty supplies and time. So let's today take a look at the Swingline Guillotine trimmer and 10 plus useful things to know. I first purchased a Swingline Guillotine trimmer in January of 2016. I did replace it after almost 7 years because there was damage to the blade. And I might go into that a little bit more, but I do want to preface this video with, I am just a crafter who has used this. I am not an expert. I don't work with Swingline, anything like that. There will be an affiliate link in the video description, but I don't want this to feel like a video where I am representing the company, I'm not like telling you how to use the product. Please read safety guidelines. There's obviously this large caution sharp blade here for a reason. So I just want to be really, really clear that this is just one person sharing their experience, and this is not like a tutorial from Swingline or sponsored by Swingline or anything like that. So the first thing that I do want to point out is it does have a locking feature. So this little clip will lock your blade in place. You can press down on the clip to unlock your blade, and then you can come underneath and push up on the clip. Sorry that I can't really show that because I'd be doing it in the opposite direction. I just want you to kind of see where it would be. When you push up on the clip, you can no longer raise the blade. I do want to quickly answer the reason that I did replace my trimmer, because I do have a new one that I bought in 2022, which is the blue one. There was a problem with the blade because I think it was something was cut that wasn't supposed to be cut, and so there was like a nick in the blade, and the paper trimmer otherwise worked fine. There was nothing else wrong with it. I was very happy with it, except for that there was this one incidence of damage. And so I worked with it for a while, but it started to get a little bit frustrating because it was about right here, and so like it wouldn't interfere with every single project, but when it did, it was bothersome. So I was happy enough to replace it with like the same thing because I liked it, even though there was that damage. So next thing I want you to know is how big it is, because as you can see, it is quite large and it does not even fit fully on the screen at any point. I could raise my camera a lot higher and then maybe I could get it all in there, but it is 14 inches wide. It is with, and I believe this is with the handle. Oh no, okay, I will tell you with the handle. With the handle, it's about 20 inches long. And then it is about like just under 3 inches tall. So if you were to like this width of it here would be about 3 inches. Okay. The weight is less than 3 pounds. It is not a heavy base. I have used plenty of trimmers that are very heavy, like, you know, guillotine paper cutters like this, that have very heavy bases. So this is one where when you're working with it, you're gonna want to hold it down. It's not gonna hold itself down, and that is important to consider because if you're expecting it to weigh a lot, your blade's not gonna come up when you lift it if you don't put some counter pressure, for instance, and you don't wanna run into any safety concerns because you're not understanding that lightness of it is going to cause you to use it differently than you would one with a heavy base. The next thing I want to let you know is that the cutting area actually ends at 11.5 inches in terms of where you have measurements for. So you can absolutely fit a piece of 12 by 12 paper underneath the trimmer. You can cut a piece of 12 by 12 paper. You just can't measure anything above 11.5 inches. So say you wanted to cut your 12 by 12 piece of paper to 11 3/4, it doesn't have a measurement for that. It doesn't come up terribly often. This is not a big deal to me, but I do think it is worth pointing out because it does appear to be a 12 by 12 inch trimmer, and it's just not. Okay. The cutting marks stop at 3/4 of an inch. So it actually stops at 7/8. Sorry, I got that a little bit off here. So here's the 1 inch. Here's the 7/8, and that's it. And so there's nothing smaller than that. So say I wanted to cut 1/2 inch off of this paper, honestly, I wouldn't do it this way. I would bring it to the 11.5 inch mark. So I have a 12 by 12 piece, I'd bring it to 11.5, and that's how I'd cut 1/2 inch off of this. But if you were trying, like, you know, you're working with something a lot smaller and you want to cut teeny tiny strips, you're not going to be able to do that. The blade here, I guess not necessarily, not the blade, this metal piece here is at about 3/4 of an inch. So occasionally I will use that as a measurement, but it's not accurate necessarily. And I don't know how your trimmer will be when you get it. But I do want to highlight that, because if you have like an inch piece of paper and you want to cut it in half, that is that's a challenging thing to do. Let's talk about how I would do it though. I have this 1-inch piece of paper and I want to cut it in half. What I'm going to do is take a sticky note, sticky tape, etc., and I'm gonna line it up at the 1/2 inch. So here I'm using the inch between 3 and 4, and I'm gonna line up my tape with that, and that's my 1/2 inch mark. You could also draw a line there or something. And then, and I kind of recommend more of a sticky note for this because it's gonna give you a little bit more room, but this is going to allow me to then put this at the 1/2 inch there, and I can hold on to this sticky note. Please be careful, please don't ever put your fingers underneath there. Again, this is not like a how to use it safely video, but I do just highlight those things. And then I can cut it in half to 1/2 inch. But you know, it takes some work to do. It is not something where I could just easily measure it, and I do want to extend the paper out with a sticky note, a piece of tape, etc. Another important thing to know about this is how to use the ruler, because they do have the inch lines marked, and they're marked clearly in this blue color on this version of the trimmer, so I do find them relatively easy to use. However, here on this centimeter area, and then again on this area, they're a little bit more gray on gray. Sorry, I realized that wasn't in the frame. This area is a little bit less contrasty, but I do think it's quite readable. I typically only use this ruler here at the top. There is the 1-inch mark, and then there are straight lines, and each of those represents 1/8 of an inch. And then there's a little triangle. It's pretty subtle, but it is a little wider at the top than the bottom. So it's a triangle with a point facing down. That is the 1/2 inch mark. So if I wanted to measure 1.5 inches, then I'm going to bring it to that point. Now you might notice that that also lines up with this grid. This grid is 1/2 inch. So each one of these represents 1/2 inch long and tall, so 1/2 inch squared. And so if I'm trying to cut halves, it's quite easy. I can say, okay, I want 3.5, so I'm just gonna bring it to the mark on my paper trimmer that is after the 3. And I know that's 3.5. 1/4 inches are a little bit more difficult. I will often start with, so I'm at 3 and I want 1/4 inch, so I know to go 2 forward because each of these are 1/8 of an inch. So 3, 3 1/8, 3 1/4, or halfway between. I'm gonna put that blade down. Or halfway between the 1/2 and the full inch mark would be 1/4 inch. I know for some people, that's clear. You're very used to reading a ruler. It's not particularly different, but I do think it could be important for some people. Some people also like to know really common measurements. So I know someone who would like, because they would cut to 4 1/4 very often, they actually just put like an extra mark on their trimmer to highlight it, or people do that with like their scoring board as well. So if there is a common measurement that you use, that might be something you want to consider, like, you know, maybe a permanent marker, a piece of washi tape, something like that to highlight a particularly useful common measurement. I often get asked why I prefer a guillotine trimmer. I cut a lot of paper. I do often multiple cards from one sheet of paper, from one pack of paper. I'm doing a lot of cutting because I work with pattern paper a lot, and then the, you know, the cardstock and everything that comes with it. Not all crafters cut to that level, and so I have to have a trimmer that I feel like performs really, really well. I do have these paper busting templates. So if you have just stumbled upon this video and haven't watched any other videos on my channel and you want to see how I take pattern paper and turn it into cards without making pattern paper scraps like I did with these cards shown here and with this template here, I will leave you a link to the video where I share this, and you can check out jesscrafts.com. You can download over 100 different ways to cut pattern paper and make cards without scraps. Slide trimmers tend to give me a more fuzzy edge. This is not about any particular trimmer. I'm not saying any particular company's trimmer gives me a fuzzy edge. I'm saying all slide trimmers eventually give me a fuzzy edge. And I do not get that experience with the Guillotine trimmer. It is self-sharpening. I am also not saying that Swingline has a unique ability to do that. If you have, like, there's a Tonic Tim Holtz Guillotine trimmer, I'm sure it gives similar results. I don't own one, so I can't, directly say from experience, but my preference for Guillotine trimmers comes from that fact. I actually like that this one is lightweight because it's easier to move around my craft room because I don't let it sit on my desk. If, for instance, you had a space in your craft room where you never had to move your trimmer, like you could just always use it right there, then I would consider maybe getting a heavier duty trimmer if I was in that situation, because then it wouldn't matter that it was lightweight and easy to move around. The price for this trimmer is about $30 to $35. The green version is $30 and the blue version is $35. It does say that the blue version is heavier duty. I have owned both the green and the blue. I picked the blue the second time, honestly, because I like the color better and I have blue stuff in my craft room. But I do not find it to be in any way more heavy duty than the other one. I didn't really notice a difference. They kind of just seem like a color difference to me personally. I'm not saying that there's nothing different about them. I'm just saying I didn't notice anything different. So I don't know what the heavy duty specifically is meant to refer to in that instance. How many sheets it can cut is the other nice reason. With a slide trimmer, I've only ever been able to cut one sheet of paper at a time. With a Guillotine trimmer, I've been able to cut more than one piece of paper at a time. I may have some focus issues in a moment because when I put blank things in front of my camera, it doesn't really know what to focus on. So I'm going to show you cutting 2 pieces of 110-pound Recollections cardstock. It's pretty thick. It's pretty representative of anything that would be called 100-pound cardstock. So I feel like I can accurately cut 2 sheets at a time. And that is a boon to me because I like to cut a lot of things at one time. And like when I'm cutting card bases, being able to cut 2 accurately. I do hold the paper firmly. That's another thing to note, is you do want to hold the paper firmly because again, the Guillotine trimmer is lightweight. And so you have to kind of hold it down. And also you don't want your paper slipping as the blade comes down on it because it's putting that pressure downwards and it could cause that to be a less accurate cut. Same thing if you're cutting several pieces of pattern paper. I do want to show if I cut 3 sheets, what would happen. So I'm going to take those and kind of see where the real limit is. I'm going to hold them very firmly because I want this to be able to be successful. But now as I start getting a little bit down the page, I'm starting to feel a little more resistance. I can get through it and I go a little slower, but I start to feel like my cuts get a bit less accurate and I get a little distortion on the edges. So my limit is 2 for thick cardstock. In terms of pattern paper, for those of you, because I assume most people are watching are card makers, especially at this point. So I have 3 sheets of pattern paper. This is not the thinnest paper on the market. It's actually probably one of the thicker ones that I would normally work with. And for me, I think 3 is about my limit. I've definitely done 2 plenty of times. So I have 3 sheets here. I do have to really make sure they're lined up nicely though, because if I want an accurate cut, if I really want these all to be 2.5 inches, then I need to make sure that they're all perfectly lined up and they stay perfectly lined up throughout the entire cutting process. And that's why technically it can probably cut more. My limit is about 3 and I probably only ever cut 2 because it gets to the point where my cuts get less accurate because I can't keep them all together. And that might be just a user error. If you can cut more, great. But I'm not usually trying to cut 10 sheets or whatever at once because it does say it's a 10 sheet capacity and that means printer paper. usually. And I would agree, it could go through 10 sheets. I just don't know that it'd be very accurate. And sometimes that doesn't matter. It depends on what your use is. But as a card maker, when I want everything to be really straight, when I want things to be the actual measurement, particularly in my case, then I want to limit myself to 2 or 3 sheets of pattern paper, and it will cut them accurately. Last thing I want to tell you about this paper trimmer. Very occasionally, I have noticed it has trouble with really lightweight paper. I'm gonna try to keep my hand on this so it doesn't zoom in and out of focus. This is just printer paper. It's like partially recycled printer paper, so it's maybe even thinner than some other printer paper out there. It can cut a lot of sheets of this, but it doesn't always cut as accurately on really thin paper because sometimes it flops or it moves the paper about. Ways I would address this is to hold the paper firmly, as mentioned several times and for several reasons, and that helps. Trying not to cut really, like if you're trying to cut really thin strips off of lightweight paper, as you see, it failed. It's not gonna do that. Got that torn edge there. That's not its strength. So if you're working with really, really thin paper a lot of the time and you wanna make really, really thin cuts with it, this isn't the trimmer for you. That is not usually the situation. I have rarely encountered a patterned paper that was so thin that this was an issue. And again, it's really more of an issue only if you're making those tiny, tiny cuts. If you're, you know, cutting like 2-inch chunks off of it, it's usually not a problem. It's just another little flaw I wanted to point out. I don't want you to think that I think this is like, there's nothing wrong with this paper trimmer. I have just found it is the best fit for my purposes, and I wanted to share some things that I like about it and things that I don't like as much about it. If you found this video helpful, here's another video where you can find more ideas for enjoying your crafty time and supplies. Let me know you like this video with a share to your crafty community, subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss the next template or tutorial, and check the video description for product links. See you in the next video.